So briefly, why is geothermal such a useful source of energy, and what does it provide that other sources don't?
Well, first of all, geothermal energy is a natural resource. It's not just one form of energy. So you're looking at the heat of the earth. And the good thing about geothermal is that the heat of the earth is an enormous resource. I mean, people can see it, I think, when they think of the sun. Think of solar energy, you look outside, see the sun coming down, you realize, wow, it's a tremendous amount of energy. But they don't realize the earth is hot. And that heat can be used in different ways. It can be used at shallow depths for heat pumps. It can be used at deeper depths for power and direct use, meaning direct conversion for agricultural and industrial purposes. Wide range of applications, widely available, and we're just beginning to learn how to tap that resource.
Okay, great. And could you compare it a little to other renewable energies like solar and wind?
Well, I think we do compare because we're often the price leaders. Geothermal, wind, and solar for years have sort of struggled to see who's going to be the price leader. We've seen cost reductions, not as fast as solar, but we're very competitive with. And part of the I guess the message for today is that renewables across the board are getting more and more competitive and can provide more of our energy use, and geothermal is going to be part of that mix. And I personally compare it the most to solar in terms of how to think about it. As I said a minute ago, you can think of solar and you can understand all the different ways you can use it. People don't think of the earth as hot, but it is hot, and there are various applications. You can see people who are using it to raise agricultural products in Boise, outside of Boise, Idaho, or for that matter, the state capital in Boise, which is heated by geothermal heat. The power in California, we're 5% of the power in California, or you have geothermal heat pumps in use in Wisconsin, New York, and other areas. So we can use the heat of the earth in different applications, different ways, depends upon what's economic in your region.
Okay, great. And yet, we don't hear about it like we do other renewables, and it doesn't seem to be proceeding as fast. So what are the major barriers preventing a faster development of geothermal resources?
Well, I think fast and slow development is, in the energy business, you're at the top of the hill one day, you're at the bottom of the hill the next. So you have to look at the longer term trends. In terms of the longer term trends, I think you see continued growth in geothermal, particularly worldwide. The U.S. market has been a little slow the last couple of years, but the world market continues to grow. In fact, we had as many power plants put online this last year around the world as we've had in 20 years, in any 1 year of the past 20 years. So geothermal is showing good growth worldwide. And why are we probably less known? Well, I think it depends on where you're at, because often it's a regional resource. So for example, you see photovoltaic cells going on homes in Maryland, Illinois, California. Geothermal power is pretty much a Western states resource right now because of the economics of drilling for the resource at depth. And that's its biggest problem. The biggest problem is working with the resource. We have to find, right now, we produce pretty much from natural systems. The estimate is worldwide there might be 200 gigawatts of natural geothermal systems. In the US, we've tapped many of the prime resources, and something close to 2/3 of the remaining resources are still hidden. According to the Geologic Survey, they're yet to be found. We don't have the technology to reliably find geothermal resource at depth, as, for example, you might have with oil and gas. But around the world, we're developing high-grade resources, and we're developing better technology, better science. And as we move forward, you'll see the expansion of geothermal continue to grow.
Okay, great. And what about the financing side? Like, how are companies paying for geothermal?
Well, financing, the hardest part about financing is not the power plant or the operation, it's the upfront cost of exploration. I mean, the problem with geothermal is you're going to drill some wells to prove a resource, and you're going to have some dry holes. And geothermal wells are large and expensive. You might spend $5 to $10 million on a production well, and nobody wants a $5 or $10 million dry hole. So the risk is considered significant. In fact, that's one of the areas we've seen worldwide being addressed. One of the things that's leading to this worldwide boom in geothermal is the fact that the World Bank and others have put funds into reducing the geologic risk of geothermal energy to move it down to more of a social cost return instead of in the U.S. where we're very high-risk capital to get that first few wells, which ends up making the whole project expensive, and frankly means many projects don't go forward.
Okay, great. And it does seem geothermal is booming more in other countries, even though historically the U.S. has been a leader, and especially developing countries. So could you comment on what countries are moving forward and what the potential is?
Well, as I said, something close to 100 to 200 gigawatts of geothermal conventional reservoirs. And in many countries, they've simply looked past them. So the first barrier has been knowledge. People to understand in Kenya, for example, the government to understand it has a resource in its backyard which can give not just power to people who need it, but also give economic growth and jobs to the local communities as well. As they've learned to do that, they've started to develop their geothermal resource, and they've been putting more and more online. And we're seeing that around the world. And frankly, about 20, so I think we have something close to 80 countries looking at geothermal development. More than half of those are emerging economy countries, where you see strong economic growth with a real need for power that translates not just into more economic growth, but in many of these countries also means basic services for healthcare, and basically the quality of life becomes a big issue where you're at. So we're seeing growth in Indonesia, East Africa, Mexico, Central America, and the developed areas of the world where there's strong economic growth and the need for power and geothermal resources are there to develop. They're moving forward with strong growth.
Okay, great. And of course, the West, our development path depended on dirty fuels that fueled climate change. China kind of followed us that way. So perhaps you can comment on geothermal and developing countries and why that's such a helpful trend.
Well, it's sort of ironic. We track the world market, and every year we put out a report on where the market is. But as we track that report, we also get a sense of what's causing things to move forward. And I know that Ben, our industry analyst, and myself, as we've interviewed companies around the world, realize that one of the driving forces in the developing world is the need for power, but the other is many of these countries are signatories to the climate treaty. So they're looking for power, but they're also looking for clean power, and that's driving their interest in geothermal. In the United States, for example, I think we're faltering. We're still trying to show leadership in climate, but it's not really there outside of probably California and a few state laws which are moving forward. So we don't have the policy driver that says we're willing to pay a little bit extra to get clean power that doesn't endanger future civilizations.
So the U.S. is actually falling behind some developing countries.
I think the commitment isn't as strong in this country. I mean, the administration has made its case, but we have no climate law in this country. The treaty drives policy. We've not signed the treaties. There still are barriers moving forward in terms of United States politics. And it's not as clear as many of these said that many of the countries where you see geothermal being developed, they're signatories to the climate treaty. They're moving forward. They've made a commitment nationally to say we want clean power, and they're finding out you can do it. The technologies are there. Geothermal, wind, solar, renewable technologies are there, and you put them together in the right mix for your country. You've got clean power, and economic growth without damaging the environment.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure, you're welcome.